Learn, connect, and lead this community at 3l.org. Professor Tom Bell, it's a real pleasure to have you on today. I'll let you introduce yourself, because I think your career is rich enough that there's many. It could take a long time if I was to read it all out.
I'll save you the trouble. I'll go quickly. Well, you called me professor, and maybe I still deserve that honorific, but as of this spring 2025, I resigned my teaching position. I, for almost 3 decades, was a law professor. Most recently, and for more than 2 decades, at Chapman University, Fowler School of Law in lovely Orange County, California. But I resigned in the spring, and happily, it was a very, warm parting, even, with some tears. But I wanted to help my clients more. I like teaching, but I've been doing it long enough. I've felt like I'd kind of done what I wanted to do there. And I have clients who have pressing problems. They create special jurisdictions. And my specialty now, through my firm Archimediate, is I do legal system design, installation, and support. And I think that's how you found me, because you want to hear about Ulex, which is basically what I specialize in. I do a lot of things around creating special jurisdictions, write MOUs and help negotiate with governments, all kinds of stuff. But kind of my specialty is Ulex.
Ulex is incredibly inspiring because, from my understanding, it's a plug and play common law, civil law system that you've amalgamated from all the best sources around the world that you could find, building on centuries of common law, and communities can adopt that so that they don't have to rewrite the common law each time. And many countries have come from civil law backgrounds where basically the government is dictating what the laws will be. There's not this kind of bottom-up common law element. So first of all, was that a reasonable summary? How would you improve on that summary?
That's very good. Very good. I'll give you a metaphor, which is totally consistent with what you said, but will resonate with some of your listeners. So this is an Android phone, and it basically runs on Linux. Android is a variation of Linux, the open source operating system. In fact, Linux is a kernel in the broader Android operating system, and that's what Ulex is like. I named it to sound like Linux. I want to emulate Linux, which has been a great success. It's open source. It's used in Android and other operating systems. It is not the whole operating system. I do have to be careful about that. The shorthand, as I say, Ulex is an open source legal system. That's not wrong, but I don't want to oversell it. It's really more like a kernel in a governance system. And you're right, Robbie, the way you put it, I like the way you put it. It basically makes it easier for users. I want to service my users. They're not all my clients, but people who want to build communities. And they have a lot of work ahead. They have to build a whole governance system, get people in there. It's a ton of stuff. I can't pretend to be good at all that stuff. But if they say, well, we're going to have contracts and people are going to commit torts and we need rules for that, I can say to them, here's Ulex. It's a kernel. It could be a kernel in your governance system, your operating system that runs your community. And, it'll be a good, solid kernel. It'll get the job done. It's really nothing fancy once you figure it out. And I just want to make it easy, give it to you on a plate. There it is.
So in some hypothetical example where I meet up with all my hippies and we buy a little set of cabins in the woods and we call it Liberland Conservation or something, we could just download Ulex. Would it be for free? Would we have to pay you? And then would it be kind of plug and play, or do we tailor some of the parameters, like setting the decibel noise for tort violations and things like that, or is it all kind of pre-packaged?
Let me take the second question first. Can we tweak parameters? And I'd say, of course, it's open source. The whole idea with open source is, here's some great code, but if you want to tinker with it, go ahead. Whether you'd have to pay for it. Now that's interesting because it gets into copyright. One of my books I wrote was about copyright. I have too much to say about that. So basically, I'll put it this way. You don't have to pay me anything. In fact, I could show you on GitHub right now the page where you can find Ulex 1.2. And that's the one that's in use, by the way. So there's a couple of special jurisdictions using Ulex version 1.2 or variations on it. And they've done, to take your second question again, to return to that, they've done variations on it. And I helped them do that. That's part of what I do for my clients. But if you look at the GitHub page, you'll see, let's just take contract law. For contract law, it uses the Restatement Second of Contracts, which was published by the American Law Institute. And the American Law Institute claims to have a copyright in their restatement of contracts. And I have no doubt they do have enforceable copyright claims to some parts of the restatement second of contracts. But I aver, and I say this as an expert of copyright law, that they do not have an enforceable copyright. They do not have a copyright period in the black letter rules of the restatement second of contracts. So in there is a rule, for example, what's an offer? It's a manifestation of intent to allow another party to create a binding contractual relation. That's an offer. That rule is not copyrightable. The Copyright Act does not cover that kind of stuff. Now, I've had arguments with the ALI about this, and eventually I just kind of backed off and said, okay, I see why you're not agreeing. It's not in your interest. You're wrong, but I don't expect you to admit that. I'm just going to forge ahead and we'll work this out later. So there we are. I'm sorry it's a complicated answer, Robbie. Do you have to pay? Not me. Do you have to pay the ALI? I don't think you should have to. I'm not sure the ALI would agree.
And they may not necessarily know that they're owed something. They're not like getting a notification that
No, no. And the thing is, if you hired just one attorney and she had access to Westlaw or Lexis or to the ALI library, you could go to her and say, we got a contract problem here. Can you help us? And she'd say, oh, yes, I have access to all the rules. Bah, 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 bah. And you could buy all the books and put them in your library. And pretty soon, I'll say this, because of the work of my most recent and kind of biggest client right now, I think pretty soon you'll be able to say, oh, we want to use these Ulex rules. This special jurisdiction has very conveniently made it publicly available because they're not afraid of the ALI, and they shouldn't be. And so I can just type in their domain name and go there, and I can see this rule about contract law. I can see all the rules. So that's where we're headed. I think we'll be there pretty soon. In the meantime, we're in this kind of awkward, kind of complicated copyright situation.
Because I'm a sucker for this subject, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. Is there a one-line sentence you could use to describe, or at least could you pick up on one common misconception that people hold around patents and copyright, and where you would point them to some understanding?
Well, I can't give it to you in one line. I give you the title of my book, Intellectual Privilege. I think friends of freedom and of property make a mistake in classifying so-called intellectual property as property. It has some aspects that look like property rights in tangible things like, pencils and post-it notes and houses, but it's just not. It's not a good fit. I think the term property has been co-opted by people who want to have copyrights and patents, and they've misused the word, and it kind of weakens the meaning of property elsewhere, and you get bad policy results. So it's a privilege. Now I hear talk, Robbie, only about copyrights and patents. Those are the ones you mentioned. I will say I do believe you can treat trademarks, rights of publicity, trade secrets differently, just sort of ethically and policy-wise. Those are different beasts. Copyright and patents, both creations of the state. That doesn't mean they're bad. It means they may be a little dubious, but they're not like property rights and intangibles. Sorry, that was more than one line.
If I was to set up a company called Archimediate and call myself Tom Bell, and would I be right in saying that the trademark issue there is I'm committing fraud, and therefore
yes,
trademark is kind of protected under the fraud rules, whereas is that the kind of main essence of it?
Yes, I think that is, if you want to be a libertarian purist, I think that's the best framing. And to say a little more, we say, so suppose you did that and I came after you wielding my service mark, we can call it a trademark, it's actually a service mark in Archimediate. The fraud would not be perpetuated on me, but I would it's efficient to let me have the right to sue you because I care. And all those third parties out there who might misunderstand the use of Archimediate, they're hurt in a very small way, most of them, but they're not interested in litigating. So to protect them, really, the law says, Bell, you can go enforce this service mark, even though you're not being defrauded, but it's kind of to defend the innocent people out there who would be defrauded by your misuse, Robbie. So I think philosophically, that's the way to approach it.
I mentioned that Live and Let Live's role in the world is a reconciliatory force, and there are many topics where reasonable minds disagree, and you've probably met many reasonable minds who take the opposite view to you on IP, and you would probably say that these are intelligent people that have landed on a very different conclusion. I happen to land on your conclusion, but I also have met many others who disagree with me. Live and Let Live would say where there are these difficult issues where reasonable minds disagree, um, we can allow local communities to adopt their own interpretation. So some local communities may adopt to see information as just information, and others may see information as legally owned property. And we can kind of let the common, let the free society demonstrate which version works best over time.
I don't disagree with any of that. It's actually a very appealing way to present the search for peace, which I share. I will observe, however, that people who want to treat copyrights and patents like property rights are not going to be satisfied with that. It won't be enough for them, I think, to be told, oh, you folks who want to treat copyrights and patents like tangible property, go form your little community and you can do that amongst yourself. But meanwhile, we over here are going to be singing your songs and using your inventions. And, that's what we think we should be allowed to do. And what they're going to do is they're going to come up to your fence and look over it and say, you're stealing. You're stealing our property. And that is a violation of rights. And here we come with clubs over the fence to make you stop. So that's what I'd worry about. Live and let live is a wonderful philosophy. I'm not, I'm a little concerned it's not going to iron out all the problems between people. I'm sure you don't promise that. It's a tough problem bringing peace between communities.
It's a tough problem, and it's not a utopia. I think the only path to reconciliation is for us all to recognize where we want to initiate aggression against others for the worthy causes we care about. And so if we can first get agreement that none of us want to be aggressed against, which is a great first place to start, then we can say, well, there are reasonable issues where we disagree. And the question is, are you going to enforce your patent desire on everyone else at the expense of peace? That's always the question. Are you willing to invade someone else? Ultimately, invade is really the question.
Yeah.
To get your way. And we would say, of course, that's the way we're doing things now. We're just in an endless cycle of lawfare, but I think we have to agree to let local communities decide. But I also think there will be negative consequences for those free information people like you and I. Those outside communities may say, look, we're not going to invade you, but we are going to we're not going to trade with you. We're not going to give you all the benefits of the access to our free markets. There are many social consequences that could be brought against people like you and I by the people that disagree with us. And that's totally fine. We have no problem with that.
I think I agree with that. I'm not sure I'd say free information. I'm careful with that term, but not free like in free pizza, because I play a little bit of music myself, and I'm always careful to name the composers. I respect creators and people who patent and invent things too. We need those people. Bless their hearts. They're creating wonderful, good things for us. I want to respect them, and I recognize it's hard work to create new, useful things or beautiful works of art. And but there's other ways to honor and pay those people than creating statutory privileges.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm looking for a better term to summarize it. I also, there's a film producer called Nina Paley who has made amazing films all in the public domain. And I donated to her, having loved the film that she made for free. So I think that's a great way of doing it. Anyway, back to Ulex. One question, Tom, just, I should have probably asked this first, but what's your kind of grand vision for the way the world is going, especially with these free enterprises, these free cities, these free communities popping up, and your role in them? What's the vision you're aiming for long term?
Well, thanks for asking. Well, let me start out with a huge backing up big picture of how I pursue my life, because I really like your pursuit of peace. And indeed, I've embraced that ideal as well. And I've broken it down into three categories. I want to help promote peace between communities. That's like preventing war. Peace within communities, helping people who form communities run their lives together so they can do things without hurting each other, and peace within individuals. Now, this last point has to do with theology, and we're not here to talk about that, but I just want to show you that, man, I care about peace too. Love me some peace. I want peace in a lot of places. But your particular question is with regard to, I guess, Ulex and how it can promote peace, I guess, within communities. Yeah. Okay.
And
Um,
between them. Yeah, and like yeah,
and between them, yeah, the
yeah.
big picture there. Yeah, that's between them. I'm glad you say that, Robbie, because, well, let's start with in. We've kind of already talked about this, but I'll just repeat the point. Ulex allows people to have a good set of rules. I don't think perfection is an option here, but time tested, honored rules that were created by experts, not me, that we can all kind of look at and say, oh, those look like some really good rules. Some smart people worked really hard to come up with these really good rules. And they come out of institutions, common law courts, that have been around a long time and are associated with very successful nation states. I mean, you should have doubts that everything's perfect, but those look like pretty solid rules. And so I can say to those people, here you go. I've kind of collected them. I'm really not, I don't view myself as much more than a curator. I kind of got a basket and went to the library and said, whoa, there's some good rules for contracts. We need torts. And by the way, Robbie, this is important for some people, not everybody, but more people than you might think. They're flag free. These are not the laws of England and Wales. Like Dubai, when they created the Dubai International Financial Center, was looking around for common law, and they said, "Oh, we're going to basically import the common law of England and Wales." Now, nothing against England and Wales and their common law, but that's kind of a bold move. I think they got away with that because there was an emir behind it. I will tell you, most people, and this is what happened in Honduras, look at another flag's laws and say, kind of feels like colonialism, and I don't like colonialism. So I was really careful. In fact, I created Ulex because I was working then on the Prosper project down in Honduras. This is before it was called Prosper, but one of the ZAs in the Honduran legal regime. And basically, we wanted flag-free rules. That's what my client said. I said, look, we can't come down here and plant the flag of Texas. I mean, that's not going to work. And I said, you're right. I agree. So can you give us something flag-free? And I said, I absolutely can. And that's what I did. So Ulex is flag-free, and that allows, it makes it easier for communities, especially when you're dealing with a sovereign, a host country that wants to create a special jurisdiction. That's the kind of work I'm working on. I'm kind of working this interface between nation states and these new kind of entities. Like I like to use biological metaphors that are being kind of encompassed by the host, and we have to avoid immune reactions by the host. So you flag free. Um, and and yes, Ulex, I need you to come back in with another question, but to try to wrap up the answer to that one, Ulex is this flag-free source of pretty good rules. I think they're pretty good. I haven't found better that can help communities figure out how to resolve their conflicts. And there's also one other point. It's not just you can do this, you can do that. It's also a set of rules that helps you reach decisions on the rules. So there's procedural rules that tell you if you have a conflict, here's how you pick judges, here's what the judges can do. And then there's basically three parts to Ulex. The substantive rules, this is assault and battery, this is a contract. The procedural rules, if you disagree about what the contract means, here's a way to resolve your dispute peaceably. And then some meta rules that just kind of make the whole system run together well.
Amazing. I think what's so exciting about coming across you, Tom, is that Live and Let Live is again this legal framework that very much includes the criminal aspects. And Mark Victor, who set it up, it still is a criminal defense attorney who runs a couple of law firms now. And the overarching framework is extremely good on the essential elements of what it means to aggress. And there's these various forms of aggressing, which I think most people reading them would very much agree with. It's things like not initiating non-consensual physical force, not committing fraud, coercion. It includes things like torts and environmental harms. And that leads me to my question, which is on environmental issues. I think this was my journey towards respect for freedom and peace was caring about the environment. And one question I've always had is, can a tort system solve issues that are global in nature, things like the ozone layer depletion, where, frankly, that was kind of a win for the statists. They all convened and they banned these chlorofluoride particles that
Chlorofluorocarbons. Yeah, yeah.
Chlorofluorocarbons. Thank you. If we didn't have the big government help, would we have solved that problem?
But oh, that's a good question, my friend. But before we go too far, we forget about this. I should go back. You mentioned criminal law. Ulex right now, the version available doesn't address criminal law. So that's something we could talk about later. Its next implementation, it will have a criminal module. Anyhow, but back to CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, and whether or not statists saved the world. Well, that's a tough question, actually. I think environmental concerns are very well addressed by tort law at a pretty small scale, even more than small. Like, yeah, you could have somebody dumping a bunch of pollution in the upper Mississippi River, and then down in New Orleans, somebody could bring suit and say, hey, up there in Duluth, you put this poison in the water and it's hurting me down here, and I can sue you. And that's a pretty, it's complicated administratively, finding all the plaintiffs and all the defendants, and, non-point source pollution. It's kind of hard to figure out who's responsible here. That's hard, but it's hard for governments too. I mean, let's not pretend anybody can just snap their fingers and solve that problem. It helps to have a lot of muscle and guns. You just kind of bulldoze through and say, well, stop it, because some expert said you should stop it. You get a solution that's probably not the best, and it's, rife with coercion. That's within one polity, the United States. Louisiana can say, someone in Louisiana, actually, Louisiana is a funny example because they still have some civil laws. So one of the few, I guess the only state that's not just packed to the gills with common law. Anyhow, maybe we should use Mississippi. So the person down in Mississippi says, I'm going to sue you under common law way up there in Minnesota because we're all under the U.S. Constitution, and you have to give full faith and credit to Mississippi law up there in Duluth. That's going to be harder to do if you're talking about the ozone hole over Antarctica, which kind of nobody owns. And then you got CFCs coming from China, and someone in Belgium complains. That's going to be tough to resolve through conventional civil litigation, even if you have the best rules in the world. I'm not saying it's impossible. I don't think it would work in our current, Westphalian system of nation states. And so what we use is treaties. And I will say, it looks like that CFC treaty worked. I haven't studied this. I actually got very much into it. One of my early and abortive papers was called Property Rights and Natural Benefits. And I used CFCs as my example to kind of promote this theory that I was trying out at the time. And I don't think ultimately it worked. The idea I had basically was we should give people property rights in stable natural benefits. So I walk outside, I'm not killed by UV radiation because there's an ozone layer. Thank goodness. That's a benefit of nature. Thank you, God. And if somebody else comes in and takes it away, the idea was I should be able to sue them in kind of a civil law process. I don't think that idea is all wrong. It's a very early work when I was early in my philosophy career. And I gave a talk and some people gave me good questions and criticism. And I said, okay, I got to try again. So I'll just say, tough problem. I tried actually to figure out a way to solve this through civil litigation. And I don't think I found that solution. I don't know of a solution out there. And I'm going to give credit to the treaty process. Treaties are kind of like contracts between nation states. I mean, epistemologically, we can doubt nation states really exist at all. But as long as there's people wearing badges and bearing flags, parading around, threatening the rest of us, I'm glad we have treaties, because that is a way that we can constrain nation states from doing really horrible things. And in the case of CFCs, I think you can make a pretty plausible case. Thank goodness for that treaty. It made things a lot better for people in South America. If you're way down there in the tip of Chile, you'd be getting fried, but for that CFC treaty.
Right. And treaties themselves are not coercive. I mean, that's the essence of a voluntary interaction, is that you agree to something, and as long as it's agreeing to not aggress against other people, you can have like a peace agreement, a mutual aid agreement or something.
I agree with that. Yeah. But I don't know. I want to be careful here because treaties are between nation states. I'm not sure it makes a ton of sense to reify. Well, sense is not the word. I'm not sure it's a good idea to reify nation states and treat them as if they were individual natural persons. And so, I mean, we talk about them as contracts, but it's complicated. Nation states are kind of strange beasts philosophically, epistemologically, ontologically. I mean, do they even exist, or is it just a consensual hallucination? Interesting questions.
It's a consensual hallucination. But where I was going with the question is, let's say Prospera in Honduras, a free city, agrees that these CFCs are indeed a pollution, and even if it's hard to tell exactly how one's neighbor is affected by these CFCs, we sort of agree as Prospera that those things are causing harm unreasonably, and we say no thanks to those CFCs. And then similarly, another free city it's somewhere in the Middle East also adopts the same rule, and then those two communities have a treaty that is
Uh-huh.
sort of consensual, that
Uh-huh.
that CFCs are going to be banned between them. And I think this could work. Let's say that those communities deem that CO2 emissions from fossil fuels are also a pollution causing harm. They could make sure that every ton of emission was sequestered in equal measure. They could still use fossil fuels. There'd just be no pollution, and they could have a treaty to say that we're allowed to trade between each other without adding some
Mhm.
sort of carbon sort of tariff, because all the carbon's been sequestered by the locals. And that to me is how we solve these big environmental challenges, is we kind of build them up from the ground up, much
Uh-huh.
to the opposite of kind of how we're addressing it now, just forcing it on
That
everyone else.
that makes sense to me. And I'll just add to that. I mean, yes, and I'll say to the extent the communities that are entering into these treaties are based on consent, then the whole system through a kind of transitive relation, you can call it consensual. Now, the problem I have with treaties is that the parties engaging in the treaties typically are founded on a ton of coercion, sometimes a lot of coercion. Like North Korea enters into a treaty with China. It's like, I'm not sure that has much to do with any individual on the ground saying, yes, I really want that. Whereas with Prospera or this hypothetical community, where was it in the Middle East? I mean, you can imagine people moved there voluntarily. They read the laws. They said, I embrace this. This is my kind of place. And then when their representatives go out and engage in treaty relations, you get kind of consent from the bottom up. I think we can smile upon that treaty as very close to an actual contract, but kind of many steps removed from the person on the ground.
Yeah, and then bringing it back to your earlier observation that Ulex doesn't address criminal law. I mean, this is why I was excited, because what we say is that there are many ways that we don't prescribe one answer for how one even defines the term reasonableness. And just for some context, the term reasonableness is really central to many tort issues, because it's often through the lens of what is reasonable. What, did the party act reasonably? And if they didn't, that's when the tort stands. But we say that's a definition that's open to uh, subjective interpretation. So we let local communities decide. But it seems to us that what you've done is the heavy lifting of you've offered a blueprint to let the local communities to decide to adopt Ulex and then tailor it a little bit. So what we're actually not asking local communities to do very much work. We're just saying, look, there's Ulex that's out there. We think that one's great, but it's not for us to prescribe which one you adopt. Um, but it is for us to prescribe that you cannot rape someone, you cannot murder someone, you cannot thieve. These are the criminal aspects of live and let live, which we've been very deliberate about.
Mhm.
So we've been very clear about which aspects are there. The right answer is very clear, and where the right answer is, there is no right answer.
Okay.
Um, and so I'm wondering if when you add this additional criminal module, we might be able to offer some help or some collaboration, or if that's something that
Mhm.
you're going to just do from scratch.
Maybe. Let me clarify a little more about what you can expect to see on that front. I think one of my versions of Ulex, I think it was 1.0, I had a criminal module. I actually tried to do that. And I basically, as is my usual technique, I went and found a third party created body of code, in this case, the model penal code, created by esteemed lawyers and judges and academics to kind of create this ideal penal code. And it was actually adopted in, I think, Idaho, and then they unadopted it. It hasn't been widely implemented, but at least it was the only thing I could find. It was the best thing I could find. So anyhow, and then I decided, I think for 1.2, that I didn't have enough of the infrastructure in place to make that work well. The procedural rules around criminal law they're different from the civil rules, and it's for good reason. Criminal law is, it's a very coercion intense activity. It's throwing people in cages sometimes. Whereas civil law or the common law, which is, I don't really think there's any common law, criminal law. People say there is. I think they're wrong. I just don't think that's historically accurate. So basic common law is not criminal. And I do think criminal, I went back and forth on this a long time. For a long time, I had this idea we don't even need criminal law. We can do everything through tort law. All the bad stuff you just mentioned, rape, assault, whatever was in your bad list, kidnapping, they're also torts. So if somebody does something bad, you can still sue them, but you can't punish them. That's the thing about criminal law. The idea with criminal law is you break the criminal law, we want to hurt you. It's kind of an ugly idea. And so for a long time, I resisted that. And I thought, along with many other people whom I respect, we just don't need criminal law. It's kind of ugly. It's unpleasant. I don't know. I've come around to the view now that yes, it's ugly and unpleasant. And guess what? People and their relations are ugly and unpleasant also. And I'm just not convinced now that we can have a working community that doesn't use criminal law. I regret that there are violent people out there that we have to react to in this kind of really awful way. But doggone it, sometimes good men have to do bad things to protect their community. And so that's my view of criminal law now. And so I'm going to be rolling out Ulex 2.0. So this is coming up soon because I've been working for years on polishing Ulex, rearranging it, improving it, upgrading it, and growing it for this client that's just about to go public, man. We're this close, this close. I know my friends have heard me say this for a few months, but when you work with governments, it often goes a little more slowly than you'd like. But really, I feel like we got this one almost across the line. And pretty soon, people are going to be able to go there and see how criminal law is handled in that private governance system. Now, I'm not going to take the credit for the criminal code there. It wasn't created by me. I worked on it, but I wasn't the lead guy. I'm not a criminal guy. We had an excellent lead guy on the criminal, and he's going to get all the credit for those rules. And he and I together worked on kind of interfacing it with the civil system. I'm just so excited about it. This system's going to be beautiful. It's going to be, Ulex is just going to be one little kernel, the little civil concerns of common law kernel. But it's the whole governance system that'll be plug and play. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's basically going to be a decentralized governance system for communities that really respect liberty and individual rights and uphold consent. That's what it's going to be. And we have a host country that is just about ready to throw the switch and let us get it going. And I have to be cagey because they've not done that, and I can't get ahead of my client and publicizing things. But once we get it up and running, basically anyone's going to be able to go to this website, download the code, and say, I want to do that too, and start running it. And you can tip your hat to me, but you won't owe me a dime.
Amazing. I really respect that generosity of giving this to the public and letting us all benefit from your hard work. Are you able to say which continent it's in, or is that giving it away?
I think I can say I'm here in California. It's not on the other side of the planet, although I have to do a lot of early meetings. And it's in a very nice place. It's in a paradise. And it'll be relatively accessible to European and American markets. Those are our main markets we're aiming at. Basically, the market we're looking at are high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals as kind of our lead market, because it's very expensive to build a new city, and that takes money. And so I'd love to say you and well, actually, I don't know your financial situation, Robbie, but that I would be able to walk up and buy a unit right away. That might be a stretch for me. But it's like all innovations, or most innovations, right? I mean, the first Apple iPhone was just prohibitively expensive. The first computer, the first car, the first everything is like, wow, that's so expensive. And then eventually people figure out how to mass produce them and how to get it in other markets. So for people like me, I guess I have to say, well, be patient. This is the prototype. Let those rich people take a risk on the fancy new thing. It might not work out that well, actually, the first time. I think it will, but first time. And then we'll eventually get the version that you're going to know and love, consumers everywhere, that you'll be able to use, and much to your benefit. That's the goal. You asked much earlier, kind of what's the big picture? And then Ulex will be, and with the rest of this code, bringing harmony within communities. I'm super excited about that. People will stop hurting themselves as much. And when they do hurt each other, they'll figure out how to make peace. That's very important. And because my vision is lots of nodes running basically the same code, it'll be again like this phone. The great thing about this Android phone is, great, I can play solitaire on it when I'm alone, but I can connect with other people. And that's what I want special jurisdictions to do. I want them to connect with each other. There are models for this, like the Lombard League, the Hanseatic League. I'm not saying those are the perfect historical examples, but it won't be the first time that separate jurisdictions running similar code have gotten together and cooperated. And that's the future I see, is basically our world looking like one of these pictures of a network, with lots of nodes and lines connecting them, but not just like a big hierarchy where there's one king or, sovereign at the top. I'm not looking for that. I want a network. I think that's what we're going to need for the future that's coming. And yeah. That's how I'll get peace between communities with Ulex. That's my plan. You guys got good ideas too. Let's all do it.
Are you generally optimistic with the trajectory of peace on Earth?
I am, but I'm congenitally optimistic. I just kind of seem to have it baked into me. But I do believe I have logical reasons to be optimistic. If you want to feel good, you can pick up Steven Pinker's The Better Angels of Our Nature. I know it's controverted, but he put in the work to gather a bunch of facts. And again, you can fight about which facts, but I don't think he didn't obviously find it impossible to write that book and make an extended argument that things seem to be getting better on many fronts. And plus, I know there's people like you, sir, and your organization, and me too. I'm going to give some credit to my efficacy. You know, I do think that if we work hard, we can make things better, and many people are because why wouldn't we want peace? If you know anything about war, I read a lot of history. Happily, I've never been in war. Both of my parents were Marines, so I've heard talk of war, of course, and I've read about war, and it's so much worse than anybody seems to think, except people who've been in war. We really do not want war. Everything I've read from people and books, yeah, we don't want war. So let's avoid that. And we seem to be doing okay now, and there's lots of people who don't want war, and I think we're making progress.
Amazing. And you mentioned your third area for pushing for peace was, between communities, in communities, and then more of a theological, maybe inner peace.
Uh-huh. Inner peace. Uh-huh.
I meet a lot of people from the inner peace world who almost have a slightly resigned view towards what's going on in the world. It's like, who are we to get involved in the kind of the day-to-day pursuit of peace on earth when that's in God's hands, and actually the only focus should be clearing my own ego, whatever terminology it might be. And then I meet a lot of people in the kind of outer freedom world who don't pay much attention to inner freedom. So it's lovely to meet someone who bridges the two. What does inner pursuit of inner freedom mean, inner peace mean for you?
Well, I don't know if we want to get into that here. I'll preface this by saying, you've kind of recapitulated the two main schools of Buddhism, right? There's the large vessel school and the smaller vessel school, and the smaller vessel school says basically take care of yourself, and the world maybe will follow along, but actually it's not your problem. And the larger vessel world says, yeah, we shouldn't transcend because there's work here to do on Earth with your fellow humans. For myself, basically, I want to help people figure out their relationship with God. So it's definitely not just kind of closed in on yourself. In fact, it's rather opening up communication with the divine. And I think that theology has done the best it could do up till now with the tools at hand, but I do believe we can make progress in theology. And I've got some ideas which I want to air that I think if people think like me, they'll look at it and they go, well, doggone it if that doesn't make sense. Because most of my life I've been going to church and reading religious tracts. I just recently read the Quran and the Bible, working on the Book of Mormon, looking for truth. And I got to say, I've been largely disappointed. There's very often, I'm a very critical reader, very often reading these texts. They're noun texts that are supposed to lead me straight to God. I said, it's not working for me. I'm seeing huge gaps in the logic, inconsistencies. Not good enough for me. I'll say that. Maybe I'm too demanding, but I think God deserves the best. And so I'm taking my own whack at it. I guess you can fault me for hubris, but I think I'll have some new ideas. I'm working on a book, new ideas that will maybe help people get closer to God. I think it's helped me. I feel better about my life and my relationship to the divine since I've been cultivating these thoughts. There's some practices too. I meditate, but I don't have much to teach people there. I'm interested in kind of just spelling out the logic and actually looking at empirical facts. I don't know if we want to say much more about it here, but I care about that. I'm glad you do too. Let's hope we figure it out.
I love it. No, I think it's really awesome. I think anyone who's trying to find commonality between all the different religions and synthesize the common truths in it, and maybe pay less attention to what doesn't quite comport, is a worthwhile goal in building bridges, because it's always confused me when someone who's been very convinced in their own religion somehow doesn't factor in that God might have not made a mistake on everyone else. And there must, that Huxley's perennial way has always resonated with me. I don't know if you've come across that.
Huxley, yes. When I was very much younger, I read some of his work. It's been a long while. Aldous Huxley. Everybody knows him for Brave New World, but he did a number of interesting things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd love to read that when it's out. Tom, is there anything else? Uh, I'm just wondering if there's any more of the intersection between Live and Let Live and Ulex that's worth discussing. Um, I guess one question would be, what would be helpful from us, as you think about your criminal side? Is there anything that, because we've mapped out things like the definition of aggressing, is that something that would be helpful for you in your criminal work?
I want to salute you for that question. One of my good friends, Joe McKinney, who is head of Startup Societies Foundation, you might know Joe. He and I have had many calls over the years. We've done a lot of business together, and he has this habit of ending his calls with, before I go, Tom, is there anything I can do to help you? And I've often said to him, Joe, that's so beautiful. I think it's a little risky, but you're not saying I'll do it. Anyhow, it's a beautiful thing, Joe. So you're kind of asking the same thing. Well, I will say this. We talked about this earlier. I do worry that copyright's going to get in the way of people having access to the rules that I think will help them. That's distressing to me. And there's ways I think that with the help of other people and organizations, that could be ironed out. It may be solved pretty quickly anyhow, but that's a recurring kind of, it's a burr under my saddle on this journey to getting Ulex out there, that I know people could worry about that rationally, and that bugs me. And I've worked out a way to get the rules available to everyone legally. Even the most hardcore copyright adherent would have to look at this after they figure out the complicated mechanics that I would take this through. They'd go, okay, I can't stop you. That is legal under copyright law. So I've kind of hacked that, but it's a complicated thing to implement. So let's put that to one side. Copyright continuing to be an issue. Well, of course, you're already helping me by promulgating, Ulex, letting people know it's out there. I think you said at some point, like you thought it was wonderful that I was making it a gift. And well, that's nice of you to say, but I don't view it that way, because my view is, it's not, the hard work's been done by other people, really. I mean, all these common law courts over hundreds of years and thousands upon thousands of cases basically found these rules. And to return to your particular question, so Tom, do you need a definition of coercion? I would say basically no. So my approach after many years studying philosophy, that's what my undergraduate and graduate degrees were in, I've kind of decided it's wisest to punt on many of the hard questions that analytical philosophers tie themselves into knots over. So Joseph Raz, may he rest in peace, I studied under him for a while, and he's famous for these very careful treatments of what does coercion mean, and he'll do hypotheticals, what can't mean that, and he'll tweak the wording until he gets just the right definition. Well, look, I'm not saying that's not a worthwhile project. I'm not convinced it's, I guess I'll say enough. It's not necessary. It's neither necessary nor sufficient. Because now I prefer to do my reasoning by cases. Casuistry is the kind of epithet we apply to it. Pascal's letters basically he used casuistry as a term of abuse. He was talking about Catholic pardons that were being sold. But the point is, I think the way to solve these hard problems is not to sit down and come up with the perfect definition of coercion or of assault, battery, etc. It's basically to come up with pretty good working definitions and then have institutions to solve particular questions. So I don't want to hear from another philosopher saying, I have the perfect definition of fill in the blank, coercion, assault, battery, whatever. I'll say, well, bud, you might be right, you might not be, but, courts have grappled with this on the ground problem many times over. And bless the hearts of the people of the American Law Institute. I disagree with them about copyright, but thank you, ALI, for taking all these smart people, judges, esteemed lawyers, academics, and putting them on the problem and going out. The idea is they go out and they restate the common law. They read all these cases and they say, this is the restatement of that rule. And then, last thing we need is not another philosopher. We need an institution where you and we have a dispute over coercion. Like I sing your song and you say that's coercion. And we don't agree about whether or not there's coercion, but we agree here is a body, this panel of judges, you and I together cooperatively formed, and we're going to listen to what they say. I'll make an argument, you make an argument, and both of us will walk away with the answer. One of us will be happier than the other, but we'll both accept it. And that's how we get answers to these questions. So I'll say, thank you if you're offering, Tom, we have the perfect philosophy for denying coercion. I'll say, I've tried that before and I've never been satisfied. Maybe you'd be the first to solve that problem. And I'll say to you, let's try another approach to this problem. Let's create the best rules we can find and institutions for giving us answers in particular cases. And just don't worry about the perfect, form of the definition. Don't worry about it. We need to solve problems right here and now. I'll take a rough and ready consent-based solution. That's good enough for me.
It's actually a great answer, because it reminds me that we're not trying to come up with a precise definition of aggressing, or even coercion. Sorry, a precise definition of aggressing we are coming up with, but not for coercion or battery or all of those things, because Mark, who founded Live and Let Live, is knowledgeable enough to know that these things are very hard to define at the edges. They're often continuum problems. What Live and Let Live is offering is more like the playground rules, the kindergarten rules, that it's just reminding people that they already agree with these rules, and that once they have remembered that, then we can look at all the places where we are using the tool, typically of government, to supersede these rules, and just to draw attention to the inconsistency in our own ethical frameworks, that we're against coercion over here, but if we can use democracy to vote some random people in over there, they can use it with reckless abandon, and that's totally fine. So it's more like we are a cultural phenomenon, and but what we do is you say, look, implement your own local interpretation of these rules, and that's where Tom Bell comes in with these frameworks for local implementation. We call all that stuff the transition stuff. We say
transition stuff.
Yeah. So today we're in a largely coercive world, and hopefully in the future we'll be in a largely peaceful world. How do we get from A to B with all these unfunded liabilities that people have justifiably earned as through serving in the military, or however these pensions are earned? We need a little bit of tax to pay for that. We have to probably make a compromise, because the old people are going to be slightly short, and the young people are going to have to pay for it, and they didn't do anything wrong either. So there's going to be some compromises, but all of that stuff's messy, and then the local interpretation of the rules is messy. But we can plug in things like Ulex as a way of saying you also don't need to reinvent the wheel here. All this stuff's largely done. So I think it makes sense to me that there's not a huge amount of overlap, but we're very, very, very much pulling in the same direction.
You have a very appealing way of presenting it. I like that. Sort of the kindergarten rules that we can all agree upon, and you build up from there. Well, can I throw out two more ideas before we hang up? We're finding common ground. So one area that I'm interested in is peace between sovereigns, peace between communities, and in a recent paper, it's one of the last papers I wrote as an academic. Let me see if I can get the title right. It's called, I'm looking on my screen here, The Special International Peace Zone, it's a very long title, From History Through Practice Toward an End to Armed Conflict in Ukraine. So I have family members who right now are in Ukraine, maybe even right this moment, hiding in bomb shelters, but frequently they're, hiding from bombing. And something I care about personally. I'm sure many other people do too, for good reason. It's horrible what's happening in Ukraine. War is horrible. And it's just right in our faces, that example. So I wrote this paper to basically bring peace in Ukraine. Okay, well, I aim high. What can I say? Using special jurisdictions. And I won't get into the history, but I looked at a lot of it, and I discovered there are historical antecedents, examples that we can draw upon that would be useful here. I won't get into the paper. It's published. It's in where did it publish? The Notre Dame Journal of International Law, I think it's called. So anyhow, it's called the Special International Peace Zone. But here's the particular idea from that paper that I would love to see implemented. It's basically, the idea is this: you gather together an investment fund, and you structure its investments so they pay off if war ends. So, for example, in the case of Ukraine, you somehow buy assets that will pay off big if you can go back to mining natural gas in Donetsk. which is one of these conflicted regions. So you set up the whole fund like that on many fronts. And so now you have a set of parties who are incentivized to bring peace because they're looking at the dollar signs. I looked at war and I thought, why do people go to war? There are many reasons, but one reason is, frankly, it's profitable for the right people. We might call them the wrong people. Some people make a ton of money from war. Greed is very powerful as an incentive. Well, let's use greed for peace. And how do we do that? We set up this fund so greedy people, I don't know if I can say bless their hearts, they're just humans. I mean, we're all greedy sometimes for various things. These greedy people say, I want some money, and here's how I do it. I bring peace. And then through this special jurisdiction framework, there's actually a draft treaty appended to the paper. So I'm ready for someone to buy up petroleum futures in Donetsk and Luhansk, and et cetera. And then they'll say, I'm greedy for peace, and I can put in their hands, here's a treaty that would do it. And it's structured to make it easy for Ukraine and Russia to get a peace process started. And it describes how we're going to govern contested zones, resolve conflicts over them. I know it sounds ambitious, but darn it, peace doesn't happen on its own. And I can't really say anyone's going to listen to me. No one's running up with their money to invest in this, but you got somebody that wants to make money and make peace. I got a plan. So that's one item.
I absolutely love it. I totally love it. Do you want to go with the second one?
Okay. What was the second one? Sorry, I got a little distracted with that one.
I mean, just such a perfect idea, because what it sounds like you're solving for is incentives. And if we can make all the incentives aligned with peace, the chances of peace are much more likely.
Yes.
It's the same
yes.
as corporate
And
governance.
the hard part for me was recognize the incentive of greed. I'm so anti-war. It took me a while to get my head around. I was like, what? It just, like many people say, well, they're just bad people in the world, or politicians like power. And I do believe that's true, but it's not just politicians, right? It's not just Putin who, enjoys war. I can see why he enjoys it, right? He's top of the heap. He gets to strut around and be a big shot. But why are all these other people going along with it? Well, some of them are scared, of course. There's lots of reasons, but just a bunch of people make money. So yeah, I think the second thing I wanted to raise was, well, if you're interested, so I hear so much what you say that resonates with my own approach to these social problems, hard problems, wicked problems they've been called, wicked problems. That I want to suggest you might find a lot of common ground in my book, Your Next Government, which presents part of the book, the philosophical part, presents a qualified justification of the state based on consent. Basically, consent is my fundamental principle. That is the thing I want to maximize, is consent between adults, of course. That's the only kind of consent that really matters. It's the only kind of consent that's really consent. So if you're looking for kind of a philosophical approach to political problems, these wicked problems, I offer one in Your Next Government, and it's all based on consent. To me, consent is the fundamental social virtue. And we can build so much on that. And if we don't have that at the foundation of our social systems, I'm not saying they won't work. I mean, there's been, alas, long-lasting, very powerful and influential human institutions not based on coercion, slavery for most of human history. But it's the best approach. It's the one that's ethically best, and I think ultimately it's practically best. That's how we release all the powerful ideas that are going to make us happier and healthier and wealthier. It's through consent. So if that interests you, check out Your Next Government. That's one of my books, the most recent one. You can get the updated audio version. There's an audio version which has an update on all my adventures creating special jurisdictions. I'll have to update it again perhaps after this greatest one goes public.
Tom, we'll definitely publish that in the show notes, and then also publicize it generally to our network. We have a kind of library section of our website that we'll push that onto Your Next Government, and also love the Ukraine idea. We'll publish that too.
Okay, and then intellectual privilege, if you want to do the copyright one, which is mostly about copyright, but it speaks to patent as well. It's intellectual privilege.
Amazing. Tom, I think with that, just going to thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyable to meet someone with so many overlapping values. And yeah, consent's the number one word for us as well. So
great. It's a pleasure to meet you too, Robbie, and keep up the good work. So I look forward to hearing more about you and your good works in the future.
We dream of a world where we live and let live. We believe in a world where we live and let live. We're building a world where we live and
learn, connect, and lead this community at 3l.org. Peace is our choice, waiting to be made.